Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar's contributions to the drafting of the Indian Constitution were invaluable. As the chairman of the drafting committee, he worked tirelessly to ensure that the Constitution enshrined the principles of social justice and equality. He also advocated for the inclusion of fundamental rights and the abolition of untouchability, which was a significant step forward for the Dalits and other marginalized communities in India. His vision and dedication laid the foundation for India's democratic system and continue to inspire generations of Indians to this day.
Dr. Ambedkar has suffered like all other great leaders of the freedom struggle. We worship the man, the portrait, the statue, and we have forgotten the idea. If anything, Dr. Ambedkar was a modernist. And I bet he would have been horrified to see India at 75 years looking vigorously backward towards ancient wrongs, trying to unseat those wrongs and rewrite history. Even the people who most claim to represent him or the castes whose causes that he advocated have more or less subsumed themselves under a religious identity, which was not exactly Dr. Ambedkar's idea as to how a nation ought to grow. Dr. Ambedkar, in his last speech to the Constituent Assembly on the 25th of November 1949, gave 3 prophetic warnings. And among the warnings was, never put your liberties at the foot of a great man. In his time, he was thinking of Gandhi, whom he never got along with, and of Nehru, who was emerging then. After his time, we have seen the reign of Indira Gandhi. We now see the current reign. And invariably, people of our country prefer to put all their problems, all their hopes, all their aspirations on just one person. That is not how a country has to run. So I think he would be deeply disappointed there as well. He is somebody who rewards reading, rereading, and especially his interventions in the Constituent Assembly, when you are grappling with why a particular phrase in the Constitution was worded the way it was, then you see the debates of the day, and then you finally see Dr. Ambedkar guiding the Assembly and telling them why the drafting committee came out with that formulation. So yes, that is one great source of inspiration. But his collected writing outside the Constituent Assembly, including his the Annihilation of Caste and several others of his works, show a radical, clear thinker, a modernist. Unfortunately, we revere the man, forget the ideal. I hear a lot of lawyers crib or be fearful of how there is entrenched privilege in the profession. Yes, there is. I do not say no, but you also have scope for absolute first generation people like Dr. Ambedkar himself. He barely passed his matriculation, but went on to have such a brilliant academic career, and he flowered when he went outside the country. Right. And he came back and served the country. So do not give up hope.
I think he laid the foundations of a republic, and a truly democratic republic, which perhaps would not have been possible without the Constitution, of which he was clearly the father of the Constitution. There are several aspects, for which both he and the diversity of the Constituent Assembly contributed towards several principles which are interwoven in our Constitution, fundamental amongst them being secularism, a constitution which reflects the diversity of India, which reflects accommodation to persons of all classes, different religions, etc. So therefore, I mean, it's very difficult to actually to state in words the immense contribution that he made towards the Republic by giving us this document, which has ensured, which lays the foundations of a republic. So I will speak about, a couple of things which have not probably been highlighted as much as certain other aspects of the Constitution have been highlighted. I would like to, for example, emphasize the use of the expression fraternity in the preamble. And fraternity, which ensures the dignity of the individual, is a preambular promise which Dr. Ambedkar emphasized upon and was specifically included in the Constitution and the preamble itself. Now you see there's a lot of law, there's a lot of subjects, there's a lot of people who've spoken about other aspects of the Constitution, which are also equally important, such as secularism. People have spoken about several other things with regard to certain other aspects, such as equality. Fraternity is something which hasn't been spoken about in that detail. But if you read Dr. Ambedkar's speech on fraternity, I mean, he says fraternity, that part which ensures the dignity of the individual. And it also says that fraternity doesn't mean a uniformity across citizens. In fact, fraternity emphasizes on the diversity.
Right.
And the respect of diverse views, respect to be given to diverse views. So that has been very, very nicely extracted in what we call the hijab judgment. Many of those, in one of the views, of course there's a split verdict, but one of the views, Justice Dhulia has extracted that preambular promise, Dr. Ambedkar's speech, etc. So fraternity is one aspect. Another ideal which Dr. Ambedkar always followed was that never put an individual or an idea beyond any kind of reproach. So I think what he also emphasized was, and he emphasized that repeatedly in many of his speeches, that you have the right to question anything. You don't really have to put any idea or any person above question. And that is basically the foundation of a republic, that you are allowed to question. I mean, no one is above reproach. So anyone can always be questioned in terms of the ideas, in terms of the practicality of the ideas, the need for these particular ideas, and no one is really above that pedestal. So I think that's also a great contribution that he made. There are several other ideas. Take, for example, adult franchise. Take, for example, elections every 5 years. These are all constitutional provisions. Often they are not very much debated. But today, when I hear some speeches from certain quarters, even from very high constitutional functionaries, which say that, well, why have this doctrine of basic structure? Why have this particular doctrine, etc.? I would want to tell them that suppose tomorrow a particular parliament were to resolve that I will do away with adult franchise, or I will do with elections every 5 years. I'll say that this particular house will now have a tenure of 25 years. Now, this is not even there in the fundamental chapters.
Right.
But will it not erode the foundations of our republic, etc.?
Yes.
Thank God for those provisions. Thank God for the basic structure doctrine. And thank God that we have it all to be able to safeguard the Constitution, of which Dr. Ambedkar was the founding father.
I think I've been greatly influenced by his writing, by his thoughts, not just the Constitution, and by his vision. He his life journey is a stellar example of how a person can overcome any limitation and not only achieve for himself but contribute and give back to society. I also believe that we have not been successful as a society in following his footsteps, and the principles of social justice, the principles of evolution as a society which he propounded, the principles of fairness, the principles of economic justice that he talked about, these are principles which we have not been able to honor as we ought to, and more often than not we are paying lip service. The emancipation that he wanted and worked towards is something we as a society need to work hard and try and achieve. Too often we use his name for token issue, and it's really tokenism in the context that his name is used, whereas there is a lot more to be learned from him and to be followed by his actions and his deeds.
The principles of equality and social justice for backward classes is an essential feature of our democracy. As a lawyer, his contribution has inspired generation of lawyers to good for themselves and also for the socially backward classes. I, as a lawyer, appreciate his contribution to the Indian judicial system, and he always considered the lawyers as the torchbearer of democracy and rule of law.
Today is 126th birthday of Dr. BR Ambedkar. The whole country is celebrating Dr. BR Ambedkar's birthday. He was the founder member of the drafting committee of the Indian Constitution. There are certain fundamental rights which have been given in our Indian Constitution, and whenever there is any violation of that fundamental rights, then we are having constitutional remedy by way of approaching the court, by way of filing writ petitions. We are very thankful to Dr. BR Ambedkar for giving this Indian Constitution